The newly appointed factory manager, Robert, took on jobs with unrealistic deadlines. Of course, we couldn't meet them, leading to delays. However, he pushed all the blame onto me. When I vented about Robert's selfishness to my wife, Linda, she said, "Wait, isn't he the one who?" It seemed like she knew something about him. I'm David, in my early 50s, married, living with my wife, Linda. We don't have kids but live happily together. I've hopped between various companies and am now employed in a manufacturing plant for mid-career recruitment. I serve as a department manager there. I'd love to become a factory manager someday, but the company policy requires a bachelor degree for that position, which I don't have. So, I can't become a factory manager. However, I do believe I'm competent at my job. Within the factory, my extensive experience allows me to assist in areas outside my direct responsibilities. This experience has enabled me to coach my subordinates, sharing tips and guidance. This led to not only my subordinates but also the factory manager relying on me, despite being a mid-career hire. Sometimes, I even offer advice to him, making me virtually involved in his work. But officially, I'm just a manager. It's times like these I regret choosing work over further education after high school. But, having started working at a young age has allowed me to network with people from other factories, which is a plus. That's how I've been living my days. However, one day marked a significant change in my daily routine. That day, we were informed about a change in the factory manager position. Simultaneously, the new factory manager was introduced to us. His name was Robert Miller. He graduated from a top university, and his father is the president of the company. On paper, he's an elite. But he tends to overestimate his abilities. Having graduated from a top university, he looks down not only on high school graduates but also on those from regular universities. He despises the factory workers and always talks down to them. And that's not all. He belittles others based on their educational background and position. For instance, when a subordinate pointed out a mistake Robert had made, he exploded, saying, "You're 10 years too early to be pointing things out to me." Even though we were just trying to help by pointing out a mistake, Robert, possibly due to his high pride, refused to listen to any of our opinions. He looked down on us for our educational backgrounds and wouldn't listen to anyone. Within a week of his appointment, Robert was disliked by all his subordinates. A month after Robert became the factory manager, he summoned me. "I've secured a job, so start working on it immediately," he said. And it was with a major client, no less. I was somewhat impressed that he had landed such a big job. But then he added, "The deadline is in 2 weeks, so hurry." 2 weeks, I exclaimed in shock. The deadline was too short. Looking at the workload, it was clear that it was impossible to complete in 2 weeks. Even with the most optimistic estimates, it would take at least 4 weeks for such a major task. It was easy to foresee that this task couldn't possibly be done in just 2 weeks. Wondering what kind of tricks he used to secure the job, it turned out he had accepted it with such an unreasonable deadline. "It's impossible, Robert. It's unfortunate for our client, but we need to delay the deadline." I advised him that the deadline was absolutely impossible to meet. But he dismissed it, saying, "You've just been slacking off until now. If you work your fingers to the bone, you'll make it, right? Now get to work immediately." He wouldn't listen at all. I realized arguing further would be futile. Reluctantly, I headed to our subcontractor's factory. "I know the deadline is unrealistic, but could you possibly do your best?" I asked for their cooperation to make this job a success. I also asked my subordinates, knowing it was a lot to ask, if they could work overtime. I was prepared for their resistance. But my worries were in vain. "If it's a request from you, we're happy to help," they said, agreeing to my request. I thanked the subcontractors and my team, and we all got to work. As a manager, I had a responsibility. So, I worked as hard as the others, not wanting to be outdone. All to meet the deadline. "See you tomorrow." At the end of the overtime, my subordinates were exhausted. So, I sent them home first. As for me, I stayed behind in the factory to work alone. Some tasks required multiple people and were impossible alone, but there were tasks I could do by myself. To reduce my subordinates' burden, I decided to work on what I could alone. This went on not just for one day, but night after night. Consequently, I started coming home late at night more frequently. Linda was worried about me coming home worn out every late night. "Are you okay? If it's too hard, maybe you should take a break from work." "I'm fine. Don't worry." To reassure Linda, I kept up appearances every time I came home. It was the 10th day since we had started the work. I was nearing my limit. I couldn't focus my eyes, and my hands were shaking too much for precise work. And I wasn't the only one at my limit. Due to working long hours every day, my subordinates were starting to show signs of fatigue. Despite our hard work, the end was nowhere in sight. This situation continued, and it was mentally taxing. Work efficiency clearly dropped, and we were truly at our limit. I realized that at this rate, we'd all collapse sooner or later. So, I decided to end work at noon by myself. When I reported this to Robert, he didn't approve. "What will you do if the deadline is delayed because you took a break?" I understand that, but everyone is at their limit. Continuing like this will only harm our health. I continued to plead desperately. After some thought, Robert finally nodded. "I'll allow it. But remember, if we miss the deadline, it's on you." It seemed he was okay with it as long as he could blame me in the worst-case scenario. Though typical of Robert, I was relieved to have gotten permission to rest. As planned, we ended work at noon and sent everyone in the factory home. That day, when I returned home exhausted, Linda had prepared my favorite food and drinks. I splurged a bit, hoping it would help ease your fatigue. Grateful for her thoughtfulness, I devoured the meal she had prepared. I relished the food and ended up drinking several glasses of alcohol, something I hadn't done in a while. Soon enough, I was drunk and began to vent about Robert. "It's impossible to meet such a deadline. That's just absurd. It's power harassment." Though I didn't remember it, I seemed to have said something along those lines. Is there really someone like that? What a terrible person. Yeah, really. Oh, if only Robert wasn't the factory manager. At this point, I mentioned Robert by name. Linda reacted to the name. "Robert, what's his last name?" "Miller, Robert Miller." When I revealed his full name, Linda began to ponder with her chin in her hand. "Robert Miller. No, it couldn't be," she muttered to herself, lost in thought. Drunk as I was, I didn't pay much attention and simply fell asleep. The next day, we returned to our tasks, trying to switch gears despite enjoying the previous night. But by then, everyone knew. We would definitely not meet the deadline. The deadline was impossible from the start. It was to be expected. Despite our efforts, we ended up delivering past the deadline. Still, finishing in 3 weeks was quite an achievement under normal circumstances. However, because we missed the deadline, Robert summoned me. "You remember our agreement, right?" "Yes." "The delay is your responsibility. Therefore, you are fired." As promised, I was dismissed. After getting fired, I packed up my belongings at the factory. I had finished packing up and was about to head out. That's when I accidentally overheard my subordinates talking. "Did you hear? The manager got fired. But it's for the best. Jer, he's better off not being here." They were having that conversation. It seemed my subordinates were actually pleased that I had been fired. It was a shock, but upon reflection, I realized I had indeed asked them to do the unreasonable many times before. Their resentment was justified. It was my own doing. With no room for argument, I left without saying a word. The next day, I accompanied Robert to apologize to President Anderson, our client. "We apologize for the delay. The entire responsibility lies with David," Robert explained to him. "He seemed to blame everything on me. He's been fired immediately, so could you please forgive us? Come on, it's your fault, so apologize properly." No matter how I think about it, it was his fault for taking on an impossible deadline, and I can't accept that. But for the sake of the factory and my subordinates, this is nothing. I sincerely apologize for this incident." Then, he stopped me as I was apologizing. No, there's no need to apologize." With that, he turned to me and said, "Well, if you've been let go, it's perfect timing. How about coming to work for my company? I've known about your reputation for a while." Incredibly, he was offering me a job at his company. Wait, him? Robert was surprised and inadvertently expressed his true feelings. Mr. Anderson then explained why he wanted to scout me. Actually, he had worked his way up from the factory floor to his current position. That's why he has a deep understanding of how factories operate. He was aware that the conditions proposed by Robert were unrealistic. However, he was impressed by how much we had achieved in such a short period and was actually checking our progress. Furthermore, he revealed, "Actually, I was your peer back in the days on the factory floor." "Is that so?" "Yes, you helped me out when I made a mistake back then. Thank you for that." It seems I had once helped Mr. Anderson. Having worked at various factories, I can't recall exactly which one it was. I never imagined such a past experience would come in handy in this situation. What do you say? Are you interested in joining my company? Yes, I'd love to. I couldn't let this opportunity pass by. I eagerly accepted the offer from him. Though I had been fired once, I quickly secured a new job. Moreover, it's a significant step up in terms of conditions, so it's fair to say I've made a big leap forward. It's unlikely I'll ever go back to the old factory. Therefore, I decided to visit my subordinates to say goodbye. I knew they didn't like me, but they were my subordinates who had supported me all this time. I felt I at least owed them a word of thanks. When I told Linda about this, she said, "Then, I'll come with you. It's just a goodbye, you don't have to come." "Please, I want to check something." "Really? Then, let's go together." It was unusual for Linda to insist so strongly. So, I agreed to let her come with me. Upon arriving at the factory, my subordinates greeted me with smiles. Surprised but grateful, I gave each of them a small gift as I said my goodbyes. "Sorry for the hard times. Thank you for everything." Many of them were in tears. "It's sad to think you're really leaving." I was taken aback since I thought they disliked me. "I thought you all hated me for making you work so hard." "Nobody hates you, David. We're actually glad you got fired. We were worried you'd be exploited under that factory manager." It turned out I was mistaken about being disliked. They believed that I wouldn't be able to become a factory manager here and would just be exploited. That's why they thought it was good for me to leave the company and were happy about it. Knowing their true feelings almost moved me to tears. I was blessed with such great subordinates. Then, I guess it's time to say goodbye to Robert as well. After bidding farewell to my subordinates, I went to see Robert. Thank you for everything up to now. Whatever. Robert responded indifferently. It seemed he didn't like the fact that I was being scouted by a major company. Thinking it was just typical behavior, I was about to leave. But then, Linda made her move. So it was you after all, Robert. When Linda called out from behind, Robert turned to look at her. Suddenly, his face turned pale. Linda, he said, recognizing her in a tone that suggested familiarity. You seem to have taken advantage of my husband. Robert had kept being intimidated by Linda. Confused, I listened as she explained the situation. As it turns out, Linda is the daughter of a major company's president and had once been arranged to meet someone for a marriage meeting. That someone was Robert. His father is the president of a subcontractor for her father's company. That connection led to their arranged meeting. However, his arrogant attitude and derogatory comments about Linda's appearance led her to reject him. In the end, she refused him, and the marriage meeting was called off. He was severely reprimanded by his father, but it seems his character hadn't changed much since then. I'm terribly sorry for what happened then, and for causing such trouble to your husband. Sensing trouble, he apologized. For me, since this situation led to a better job opportunity, I was inclined to forgive him. But she felt differently. It doesn't matter what you said about me. I didn't take it seriously since you were only talking about me at that time, but I cannot forgive you for hurting someone important to me. I will make sure to report this to my father, she said, visibly angry. After saying that, Linda quickly left the scene. I followed her, leaving that place behind us. Things moved quickly from there. She reported his past behavior to her father. This information quickly reached Robert's father, who became furious with him. How many times will you repeat the same mistakes? I can't entrust the factory to someone like you. You're fired. He decided to fire his son. But it didn't end there. You'll get no more support from the family. It's time you made it on your own, he told Robert. Robert had often relied on his family's support in the past. After losing his job and finding himself alone, he was left to fend for himself, adrift and directionless. As for me, I was thriving in my new role at the company, quickly making a name for myself. My hard work was recognized, and I was given responsibility for one of the factories. Having achieved my long-held dream of becoming a factory manager, I was performing even better than at my previous company. Motivated by the support of my wife, I was determined to work even harder. Just come inside the house, please. When I returned from work, a distraught housewife from next door was standing in front of my house. Seeing her shivering in the cold, I led her inside and offered her a warm bath and a meal. I couldn't help but be concerned about her situation, so I asked her about it and inadvertently. 3 weeks later, a stern-looking man in a black suit came to my door. Please accept this deed for $3 million. Huh? My name is Luke. There's nothing particularly outstanding about me. He is an ordinary businessman. But there's one thing that sets me apart from other businessmen. Both of my parents have passed away. It's possible that there are others who have lost their parents to illness or old age under similar circumstances. But mine is different. It happened about a month after I started working at my current company. Back then, I was still trying to learn everything and was completely overwhelmed. Then, a phone call came into the office. Aaron, my boss, turned pale and said to me, "Luke, listen calmly. Aaron, the police just called. Your parents were hit by a runaway car and have been taken to the hospital." What? Upon hearing Aaron's report, my mind went completely blank. The same was true for a senior colleague working at the desk next to mine, whose hands had stopped typing. "We're going to the hospital right now." "Huh? I'll drive. Pull yourself together, Joshua. You take care of things here." "Understood. Hang in there, Luke." I feel truly fortunate to have had such supportive bosses. They immediately took me to the hospital and stood by me as I was in a daze. Upon arriving, a police officer in uniform welcomed us and led me to my parents. They took me to the morgue. I learned that my parents were just walking across a pedestrian crossing when an elderly driver crashed into them. Apparently, the driver had a sudden health issue while driving and died at the wheel. The cause of death was a heart attack. Naturally, the driver couldn't brake and continued to accelerate, crashing into my parents. Dad, Mom, ag. After the police officer's formal report, I collapsed on the spot. Aaron set me down on a chair in the morgue, but I couldn't stop shaking. "Your parents died instantly. The driver who caused the accident also." The only small consolation was that my parents didn't suffer before passing to the other world. But that doesn't make the sadness go away. The family of the person who caused the accident came that day, and a man, possibly their son, deeply apologized. He looked about the same age as my father. "I'm so sorry, my father, I'm so sorry." Then Aaron stood up to protect me. "I understand that you've also lost your father and are, in a sense, victims as well, and I can understand your desire to apologize quickly. However, he has just lost both his parents at once. I don't think it's right to apologize to someone in such a state of grief." The man's shoulders shook at Aaron's words. "I'm sorry, I understand, but apologizing here and now is just self-satisfaction. You've also suddenly lost a family member, so your emotions must be all over the place. Please come back later with a lawyer to apologize formally." Aaron's firm stance was truly reassuring. Without Aaron, I might have lashed out at the man in front of me or accepted his apology and forgiven him. After Aaron spoke, the family of the perpetrator left, but not before Aaron comforted me with a gentle pat. "Aaron, it's okay. Take some time to rest. The company will take care of everything else, okay?" "Yes." Aaron's words brought tears to my eyes again. The company really took care of everything afterwards. They received compensation from the family of the perpetrator and arranged for a formal apology with a lawyer present. Thinking calmly, the person who caused the accident was no longer in this world either. Their family just kept apologizing. Since I had no one to direct my anger towards, I ended up just accepting the money and closing the chapter on this incident. Honestly, I didn't want to have any more involvement with the family that caused my parents' deaths, so it worked out. So today, I had to work alone from the house where I used to live with my parents. I was living these lonely days. My house is in a typical residential area, but many of the nearby homes are new and impressive. Especially the house to my right, which was large and had been vacant for a while. It seemed that someone had recently moved in. So someone has finally moved in. I thought this as I glanced at the moving truck. It was a large truck, so I was curious, but I didn't know who had moved in. I've heard that in apartments and condominiums these days, people often skip the moving and greetings due to privacy concerns. It must be a young family that moved in next door. In the end, there was no greeting from them. Even if I thought about greeting them in the morning, our paths never crossed during my morning commute. Still, I thought I'd greet them whenever we did meet. I didn't think much of it. A few days later, as I was returning home from work and was about to reach my house, I witnessed a woman in front of me whose paper bag tore, spilling the groceries she was carrying. Seeing the woman let out a small cry, I immediately ran over, I picked up an orange that had rolled to my feet and went over to her, but the torn paper bag would make it difficult to carry everything back. I offered her my reusable bag, which I always carry with me, and suggested she use it to carry her things back. But this is my place, I said, pointing to my house. The woman, surprised, said, I didn't know that. Something about the context felt off, and it turned out that the woman lived in the luxurious house next door. The woman's name was Evelyn. Evelyn was very thin, and her voice was frail and soft. Knowing that I lived next door, Evelyn seemed a bit surprised. Well, I can understand how she felt. After all, my house is a dilapidated building, far from being considered nice. I'm sorry. I just assumed an older person lived here. No, it's an old house, so it can't be helped. I responded with a wry smile to Evelyn, who seemed apologetic. I'm sorry for not greeting you earlier. My husband thinks that moving in greetings are unnecessary nowadays. I see. That's the trend these days. Many people think that it's unnecessary to interact with neighbors. I'll return this bag to you soon, so please wait a moment, Evelyn said, rushing back to her house. Saying that, Evelyn hurried back to her house. I watched her leave and waited a bit, and then Evelyn came back holding something in her hands. A neatly folded reusable bag and beautifully wrapped cookies. I'm quite confident in my baking, so here you go. Inside the adorable wrapping were cookies that looked good enough to be sold in stores. The simple, bite-sized round cookies had the homemade appearance of something made with children at home. Thank you. Did you make these with your kids? No, I don't have children. It's just my husband and me. I see. Yes, even though I'm the one who ends up eating them, I find both making and eating sweets enjoyable. Evelyn said with a gentle smile, clearly loving the process of baking. However, the fact that she was the only one eating them suggested her husband didn't partake in her baked goods. I'll gladly accept. With that, I politely unwrapped a cookie and tasted it right there. It was vanilla flavored, crumbling deliciously in my mouth. It was genuinely tasty, no flattery intended. So delicious. It's been a while since I've had cookies this good. Your love for baking really comes through. I shared my thoughts, including my gratitude. Evelyn probably hadn't expected me to unwrap and eat them right on the spot. After looking at me with surprise, she thanked me with a beaming smile. Thank you so much. That was the beginning. We didn't exchange contact information, but we started greeting each other more frequently. Sometimes, after I got home from work and turned on the lights, the doorbell would ring a few minutes later. Our old doorbell would make a ping sound when pressed and a pong sound when released. When I went to the door, Evelyn would be there, bringing me sweets. At first, I thought about refusing. After all, she was a married woman, and it wasn't exactly commendable behavior. But it was clear her actions were driven by a desire to have someone enjoy her baking. From our conversations, I learned that her husband Brandon was wholly devoted to his work and they rarely went out together. For such a young couple, with no children, it must be a dull existence. Maybe she's as lonely as I am. I couldn't help but notice Evelyn's loneliness. Unable to outright refuse, I began accepting her sweets and offering feedback. Yesterday's pastries had a great texture and went well with coffee. I liked them. Those crunchy treats are perfect for snacking. They're the right size to munch on while working, so I can't stop eating them. Such comments became routine. Evelyn would leave with a joyful smile. This went on for weeks. I knew this situation wasn't right. Evelyn was married. Yet, I was growing fond of her presence. Having lost my parents suddenly, my chilled heart was warming up. Just seeing Evelyn's smile brought sunlight into my winter night-like heart, turning it warm like a sunny spring day. I never visited her home. I just waited for her to bring sweets. Then one day, Evelyn stopped coming with her treats. She used to come almost every other day, if not daily. Did her husband find out? If a man finds out his wife is visiting a single man's home to bring him homemade sweets, it's natural for him to suspect something inappropriate. I'm innocent, but from her husband's perspective, it's understandable he wouldn't be at ease. It's going to get lonely again. Since Evelyn stopped coming, I've felt a loneliness similar to when my parents passed away. No, perhaps even greater than that time. I've been zoning out more at work, causing concern for Aaron and Joshua. Having no particular hobbies, I find no joy in anything I do. Gradually, my appetite has decreased, and even foods I used to enjoy feel like chewing sand, making it even harder for me to eat. I felt my strength waning, and even though I knew this wasn't good, I felt helpless to change anything. Feeling a creeping sense of despair about various things, I was heading home from work one day. My body felt heavy for a while now, and I knew I needed to snap out of it, but I just couldn't find the motivation. As I looked up with that thought, I saw a figure in front of my house. The swaying shadow almost looked like a ghost. Huh? Of course, the figure wasn't a ghost, but its hair was unkempt. Not even sandals, let alone shoes, were on the feet. But there was no mistaking that the figure was Evelyn. Startled, I immediately rushed over to her. Evelyn. Up close, it was evident. Evelyn's clothes were filthy, and she wasn't even wearing a jacket. The current season is winter. Evelyn was completely frozen. When Evelyn, who had been hugging her arms, clung to me, I knew what I had to do. Evelyn, please come inside. I'm sorry. Her response was so faint, it was clear she was at her limit. I gently ushered her inside the house. I quickly lit the kerosene stove, set a kettle on top, and made some warm cocoa for Evelyn. Here you go. In the bride room, it was evident how terribly dirty Evelyn was. Moreover, being barefoot made her feet look chillingly cold. What happened to you? I'm sorry. I'm not blaming you. Why were you outside in such light clothing this season? The truth is, my husband kicked me out of the house. What? Evelyn began to sob as she explained her situation. She had been kicked out by her husband 3 days ago. In this cold weather, being thrown out with just light clothing was unthinkable. If it had rained or snowed, she could have easily frozen. You've been out since then. Where have you been staying? Well, it's embarrassing, but in a park. What? I was essentially homeless. Hearing Evelyn's reply, I frowned and led her to the bathroom. There are many things I want to ask, but you must be cold, right? Please use the bath. But I'm so dirty. It's a bath. Feel free to use my mother's soap and shampoo. I explained the soaps, shampoos, and hairdryer available in the bathroom. For a change of clothes, I offered her some that my mother used to wear. Though hesitant, Evelyn nodded as if she was looking forward to a bath after a long time. While she bathed, I prepared a simple meal. For tonight's dinner, we shared a serving of ready-made deli food and spaghetti meatballs from the local supermarket, along with a simple salad of just lettuce, cucumbers, and cherry tomatoes. Adding some soup and a dessert for after the meal would make it a complete dinner. If it were just me, I would have settled for just the deli food and spaghetti. As I finished preparing, Evelyn came out of the bath. Seeing the dinner for two laid out on the table, she tilted her head inquisitively. Where are your parents? Oh, it's just me. Yeah, I lost them in an accident. I hesitated to share this with kind-hearted Evelyn, not wanting to worry her, but there was no avoiding it in this situation. When I honestly explained that my parents had passed away in an accident, Evelyn shed large tears and mourned for them. That alone warmed my heart. Then, these clothes must be your mother's, cherished by you. Yes, but if no one wears them, they'll just get eaten by moths. No, thank you for lending them to me. Afterward, we sat down to eat together. Evelyn said, "This is really delicious," and seemed to genuinely enjoy the meal, which made me happy, and for the first time in a while, I was able to eat properly. Then, I made some warm tea and listened to Evelyn's story again. Even if it might be meddling, sometimes pouring everything out can make one feel better during tough times. Evelyn's story was a harsh one. My husband believes in male supremacy. He thinks women should just silently obey men, walk 3 steps behind a man, get up before a man, and never go to bed before him. Does he have any love towards her? He yells at the slightest thing, and even when there's nothing wrong, he tells me I'm useless. If anything displeases him slightly, he doesn't hesitate to raise his hand. And finally, he said, "That's why I told you I hate sweets. What's with this sickly sweet smell? Never make sweets again." And he threw away all my baking tools, whisks, spatulas, everything that could be used for cooking, without asking me. I do all the household chores properly. Baking was the only time I felt relieved, and he took that away from me. I didn't know what to look forward to or strive for anymore, and I lost all will to go on. Evelyn, looking down, sniffled. My negligence in household chores enraged my husband further. There's dust left. There should always be at least 5 dishes. There are wrinkles on the shirt. I endured it all, but 3 days ago, he said, "I don't need a wife like you," and kicked me out of the house. That's terrible. I wasn't wearing a jacket since I was inside, and I didn't have my wallet or phone with me. I had nowhere to go, barefoot. Evelyn, covering her face with both hands, was clearly distressed. "Did you contact your family?" "No, actually, my mother passed away a long time ago, and I was raised by my father. When I got married, my father was overjoyed. He said, 'Now I can rest easy.' I wanted to make my father feel at ease, so I couldn't rely on anyone and ended up spending 3 days in the park. I was at my limit both physically and mentally, and unconsciously. My feet led me to your house." Evelyn's story was quite severe. I'm sorry for the trouble, not just today, but also before." "Yes. You must have realized I was bringing sweets because I wanted praise and feedback, right? I'm really selfish. I'm sorry." Evelyn apologized to me through her tears. "There's no need for you to apologize. Instead, let's go to your father's place." "But I don't have parents anymore, but you have someone you can rely on, and I think your father would be happy if you relied on him." "Really?" "Yes. It's better to talk while you can. It's too late to regret not talking after losing someone." Convinced by my words, Evelyn cried again. The next day, I lent her some of my mother's clothes and a small amount of money, and she took a taxi back to her parents' home. 3 weeks have passed since I sent her back to her family. Suddenly, a stern-faced man in a black suit came to my place, and I almost wanted to pretend I hadn't seen him and close the door. I didn't because he introduced himself as Justin, Evelyn's real father. Believing his words, I invited him into my home. After seating him in the living room of my old house and serving tea, he composed himself and deeply thanked me. "Thank you for persuading my daughter to return home." "It's nothing. So, Evelyn, your daughter made it back home safely." I was relieved because I had been worried that her husband might interfere. "My name is Justin, Evelyn's father. She's a bit sheltered. I can't thank you enough for what you might have done if you hadn't persuaded her." Justin's words cleared up a mystery I had long pondered. So Evelyn was indeed like a rich lady. Please accept this as a token of my gratitude. Eh. The tower mansion over there, the top floor 3 LDK. Here's the deed, worth $3 million. Please take it. He placed the deed to the tower mansion on the table. Shocked by the sudden offer, I tried to decline while pushing the deed back. No, I didn't help with that intention. Then, what intention did you have when you helped my daughter? Asked with a beaming smile, I found myself at a loss for words. But even if I simply claimed it was out of kindness, it's doubtful I would be believed. Sorry, I fell in love with Evelyn. Of course, I had no intentions, and I haven't done anything. I helped her because I love her. I didn't want to see her sad. I honestly expressed my feelings. I've heard about you from my daughter, from meals to clothes, even lending her your late mother's clothes. I knew how sincere and good you were just from hearing about you, but now that I've met you, I feel it even more. With that, Justin offered the deed again, looking a bit hesitant. That's why, would you consider moving to a new house? This house is, well, quite. My house is indeed old and dilapidated. Gusts of wind coming, and the insulation is cold as if eaten by rats. He must have heard about the condition of the house from Evelyn. That's why Justin, with good intentions, was trying to pass the deed to me. This house is filled with precious memories of my parents who are no longer here. I want to stay here forever. I'm sorry. I appreciate your concern. When I sincerely expressed my regret, Justin shook his head gently. No, you truly are a kind person. Please take good care of my daughter. He said that. Not fully understanding his true intentions, I was puzzled. But then, through Justin, I was able to get in touch with Evelyn again, and we were reunited. I was invited to Evelyn's family home on my next day off and treated to her homemade sweets. I fought so many times. Evelyn's sweets have a gentle taste. I was able to divorce him after that. Really? Yes, apparently, he was terrible at work too, being oppressive towards his colleagues, and he was about to be fired. Well, I kind of thought so. Given his behavior towards Evelyn, I had suspected he might act the same at work. Well, regardless, I intend to get a proper alimony from him. Evelyn, laughing, had become much stronger than before. According to Evelyn, I don't want to trouble you. I'll become strong. I'll do my best. With Evelyn's divorce finalized, our relationship officially began. There's a rule that a woman can't remarry within certain days of her divorce. It's apparently to clearly establish paternity if a child is born. We took our time and got married without a hitch a year later. Evelyn agreed to live in my family home, but given its condition, a renovation was certainly in order. By then, Evelyn's ex-husband, due to alimony and a demotion, had already left their large house, so I figured Evelyn wouldn't be troubled by him anymore. That was a relief for me as well. Considering Justin's feelings, he would want his daughter Evelyn to live in a proper home. Understanding this, I decided to renovate my family home. The renovation company was an acquaintance of Justin, and they understood my wishes well. Taking into account my desire not to erase my parents' memories, they managed to renovate the house while preserving its original charm as much as possible. A few years later, Evelyn and I were blessed with a long-awaited child. Gazing at the nursery we had prepared, thinking of a future child, I murmured, "It's important to cherish memories, but we must also value the future, right?" Now my wife, Evelyn, says, "Yes, that's true, but I also want to cherish the past. We have the present because of our past, after all. So, let's continue to create many more memories in this house and build our happiness." We smiled, expressing my gratitude to my parents in my hearts. As I gently caressed Evelyn's growing belly, smiling happily, I embraced the hope for our coming future.